I'm going to show you how to put textures all over this. So I'm just going to rewind the animation and show you what to do. So here we are. I'm in the modeling layout. If I hit Z, we'll see it's currently in rendered. For now, I can just go to solid, and I'm going to start with the toilet and go into edit mode, object mode, click the toilet, and I'm going to show you how to essentially put wood on here. You'll notice these red lines on the corners. That's telling it where to unwrap. So I'm going to do all of these steps again. I'm going to clear the seams I have. So I'm going to go Control E and clear those seams, and then I'll show you how to mark them again. You won't have any to clear right now because you haven't put any in. I'm going to put my screencast keys on. So down here on the left, if you're wondering what I'm pushing, you'll be able to see it. So I'm going to hold down Option and click this edge, and I'm going to get all of the corners and down the bottom as well, which that happens to be poking through my ground. So with all of those highlighted, you can do them one at a time if you want to. I'm going to go Control E, and then, as you'll see down the bottom there, Control E, I'm going to go and choose Mark Seam. Be careful not to choose Mark Sharp. You want Mark Seam. And to double check that you've done it right, you should have slightly redder lines on the edge there. So with that all highlighted, I'm going to go to UV editing. You could do this in any order you like. And I'm going to hit the letter U to unwrap, and this brings up the UV mapping menu. And I'm going to choose Unwrap, the top option. Now I have one of my rust textures happens to be open here from some previous work, but I'm going to close that, and you'll see these are the shapes of the toilet block. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open my wood textures. So I get my textures from this website called Polygon. So P-O-L, 2 I's, G-O-N. And if you put in plank and tick the box free, it'll show you some free textures. I've used this one on the left, wood planks 028. I've also used rust, so search rust and tick free, so that one's free. And I've used a displacement map from this corrugated iron. So if you click it, you'll notice that these various different maps. If you want to use a nice and shiny one, choose the metalness workflow. But I use this displacement map. What you can do if you don't want to pay for it, I recommend you do because it is really good. You could use the displacement map from this corrugated iron sheet. The pattern is a little bit different though, so that's the displacement map you want. You'll have to give them your email to sign up, but it's worth it. They're not going to pester you too badly with your emails. So anyway, that one is called Wood Plank 028. So here I'm going to open Wood Plank 028. So I'm going to click Open and go to my textures, and these are all bought from Polygon. So Wood Plank 028, and I'll dig in here. Oops, don't want 6K, I'll go 3K. I'm going to get the color variant right there. I'm going to click Open Image. And it's quite a large image. And if I hover over this area and push the letter L for link, selecting linked, that's allowing me to grab that section which is the front of the toilet block. I can't see it though, so I need to really start doing some connecting. I'll make some adjustments for this once I've connected it. So I'm going to jump into the shading option, and this little window here is the one I want at the moment, so I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. And looking on the right hand side, there's this icon. If I hover over it, it says context material. So there's no materials in here. I'm going to hit the plus. That's going to create a new material slot. At this point in time, I've got nothing else to copy. Well, I probably do from a previous model, but I would click that button and and build it up if I want to. So I'm going to go new. Alternatively, I could click one of the new over there. This looks complicated. It kind of is, but you'll get the hang of it. So this toilet block is now being controlled by this node tree. And if I was to go into rendered view, this color here is dictating what color it is. I don't want a bright red toilet block. I want it to be wood, that photo. So I'm going to plug into here the base color, the photo. So I'm going to, with my mouse off on the left, Shift A to add. And I like using the search function, so I'll click, and I'm going to type image. And choose image texture. These little dots, this yellow dot next to color, I'm going to click and hold down the left mouse, hover over, and it'll change color slightly. And when I release it, it's now connected. It was controlled by that crazy red color, now it's black. It's black because I haven't opened an image texture yet. So I click open. That's from a previous render of my practice. So anyhow, I'll go to textures. I don't like that view. Change my view slightly. Wood, panel 0, plank 0 to 8. And I want the color var1 as variant 1. And I open that image. So we can see the wood is starting to attach to my shed. It's not laying out the way that I want it just yet. And I don't want that render engine, so I'm going to go look dev. So that's essentially using this lighting system and lighting nicely so I don't have crazy shadows. There's some other things that are going to be done, and I might as well do them while we're in the right layout. I'm going to plug in extra image textures to a couple of other of these nodes. So I'm going to click this one, make sure it's highlighted so you can deselect and then reselect and see the white outline. Hold down Shift D and it's going to duplicate. This saves me a lot of bother because when I click open it goes to the correct folder. I'm going to use this one here that says the name wood plank 028 and then gloss. So I'm click gloss and then open image. If I plug the gloss into roughness, it's not perfect, so we need to make some adjustments. So that needs to be inverted. It's essentially the same kind of scale, but it's black and white or white and black. Much the same, I guess. So anyway, Shift A, search, invert, invert, and I'm going to drop that on top. Essentially, we've got a connection from color to color, and then color to roughness. And again, highlight one of those, Shift D, or you could insert it like you did at the very beginning. Click open, and this one's going for the normal map. Sometimes you have two normal maps, this one only has one. NRM stands for normal map. Open image. I can't plug this color straight into normal, doesn't like it, won't work. I'm going to go Shift A, search, type normal, NORMAL, normal map. I'm going to feed color into color and this normal into normal. What that does is it allows the light to interact with some of the edges. It doesn't look so much in that look dev, but under the right render engine, say cycles for example, you'll see a whole lot more texture. So the light will be hitting certain cracks. Not quite so much there, but if I was to mute it, highlight it, click M, and then unmute, there's a little bit more shadow in those cracks and the light will hit a little bit better. I'll try to illustrate that a little bit more later on. So now I'm going back to UV editing. And looking at this front section, I want to scale this. And I really want to have one wood panel to be about the width of that section. So I'm going to scale that up. And from the wrong place, mouse on the left, make sure you go undo if you need to. S scale, keep your mouse in that area, S for scale, trying to line up, I look on the left side here, making the wood panel the same width as the door segment. But this one isn't lined up, so I'm going to maybe scale on the x-axis, SX. I'm just going to continually scale until I get it the way I want. Proving a bit tricky today. I've practiced this enough times, but and then we have a look, what does it actually look like? Still not the right width. That's nice and lined up there. It's not lined up there the way I want it. So maybe that inside line and that inside line, they seem to line up with nice planks, but the edge doesn't quite have that cut off that I'm after. So what we might try is a little bit of individual manipulation. Take that one, drop it out. It gets out to the edge, and it hopefully gets me that little bit of shading that I'm really after. Might leave those alone. It's not perfect, but it'll do for my purposes. Now looking over here, that side, I'm not sure which one is the left side. Deselect all, push L. If I grab and move that around, that tells me I'm looking at the correct side. I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees, R to rotate. 90, enter, and I'm going to have to scale this one as well. Scale, and I think across the front there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wood planks. So I'm going to scale this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there we go. Now this is repeating. You'll see the same section repeating itself. It's okay for this sort of activity. And then I want the other section. If I hover over here, deselect all, L, rotate 90. Just like before, R90, enter. Scale that up. Might shift it across. Use a different section of wood. Quite handy to look at the correct side, and that's a pretty reasonable way of doing it. So if you zoomed out, looks like wood. And then elsewhere I have the back. Let's see if that is the back, I think. Pushing L to highlight, I'll move that around. Yep, I've got the back. And again, similar size. That one's much wider than it is tall. So we'll have a look and see what does that look like. So if we look at these are nice and round. And if I was to scale that to be the same height, SY, you'll see how stretched that is. So we need to make some adjustments to the others. If you make it too squashed, what are round knots stop being round. So what does that tell us about these ones? They're too tall. So I'm going to highlight those, L, and then I'm going to scale it in the y-axis, SY, taper them down to being much shorter. And I think that looks a whole lot nicer without it repeating multiple times. It's doing a bit of a repeat. And I'll get the other section, L, to highlight that one, SY just in the y-axis, GY, bring that up, and I think that's going to look a whole lot nicer. So we've got all the outside parts of the wood done. Next, I'm going to work on the door. So I'm going to tab into object mode, click the door, and then tab into object mode. This doesn't need any unwrapping because it's simple and flat, so I can press U to unwrap, and there is my door unwrapped, and it's not connected onto the door. So again, we have to make a new texture. Plus, don't click anything else yet. I can choose as a structure the material it's already made, and if I've forgotten what the name of that material is, I'm going to go to edit mode, no, object mode, click that door, and this material is called material 002. So that's a terrible name. So I'm going to call this wood plank tutorial. And I did it that way so I can identify it. I've got some other textures I've already made, and I don't really want to get confused. So now click on the door. I've got this slot made, but I'm going to use this wood plank tutorial as my basis. Already made. Ta-da! Here's one I prepared earlier, a bit like a cooking show, I suppose. We can see that the wood planks are running in opposite direction. I don't want that. Back to UV editing. Highlight the door, and I will rotate that 90 degrees. R, Y, 90, enter, and that looks very stretched. So I want 1, 2, 3, 4 panels wide, SX, and that's going to go, that's 3 panels, SX. There we go. So I've got 4 wooden panels wide. And then I have to decide if it's the right height, SY. So that's obviously squashed. And if you zoom in and have a look, try and decide when it's the right shape. I think that looks about the right shape, rather than going Y and stretching it crazy or inverting it. So that's too stretched out. SY. If you go too far, it pancakes it the other direction. Okay, I think I'll leave it there. You can move it around somewhere else and get some knots that haven't been used before. Next is the rust, so I'm going to apply rust to the roof and to the hinges. So going into object mode, deselect all, click the roof. This is a simple shape, nice and square, but for our purposes what we need to do is a subdivision surface. This is a little bit for later on, and if I tab into edit mode, I have subdivided this. So I'm going to right click and show you this is the subdivide menu. If I click it again, it'll do more subdivisions. I don't need that, so I'm going to undo it. But right click and choose subdivide, and then the subdivide menu here, you can increase your number of cuts. So I think I had 10 across, and then I did a loop cut, Control R across the edge, just to get an extra one, so that this rounding on the subdivision surface doesn't make it look like crazy round corners. So those are the steps that I did. So there's my subdivision surface. I'm going to need that subdivision surface. If I hit Z to go on wireframe, and you'll see these extra black lines. So when I increase the viewport settings, you'll see extra lines here, and that's going to be needed to make the corrugated iron effect. Z, get out of wireframe, go back to rendered. Okay. So I've unwrapped my roof, and it looks a little bit stretched over there, but that's because it's over a rectangular texture. X, to close it, I'm going to go open the rust. So if you recall, the rust I used is rust plane 007. So I'm going to open textures, QRST, rust plane 007. Color variant, open that. So there's my rust. Now I need to actually make it attached to the roof. Shading, new material slot, brand new, start from scratch, Shift A, search image. I'm going to connect this image texture. I like to make it wide enough so I can read the title. Connect color to color. That'll give me a warning color. Hey, what's going on here? Open textures, rust, and I open it, and so there's my rust on the roof. There's a couple other maps to increase its viewing quality. Shift D, open, I want the gloss map, and it needs to be fed through an invert. Shift A, search, invert. It's not a lot of difference, but it'll be different enough. And I'm going to Shift D again, open the normal map, NRM, Shift A to add, NORMAL, normal map, color to color, normal to normal, and that gives us various different bumps for the light to interact with. Where are the corrugations? I'm going to use a displacement map for that, but before I move on, I'm going to name my material. So this is rust, and I'll put tutorial in here. The reason I'm doing that is I've already got a bunch of other rusts made and I don't want to get confused with it. This is just for my tutorial purposes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the modifiers. So this looks like a little tool, and I've got a solidify that just gives it a little bit of thickness. You can do that or not. Subdivision, you definitely need that. I'm going to add another modifier and then choose deform, go into this column and choose displace. When I click it, it's doing something really crazy, probably because of the order of these modifiers. So if I make this displacement go up a bit, and then there it is, and then up. So the displacement is applying first. Don't worry about it flying in the air, we'll fix that a little bit later, but the order of these modifiers matters. So we're putting the displacement first, and then it's subdivision surface. I think that might have to adjust that later, still a bit of testing. And the subdivision gives us more, so that was a little bit strange. I might just remove that solidify, pop that down. So the displacement probably should be after the subdivision surface, but the thickness was causing a problem, so I've just deleted it. Okay, so with the displacement modifier on, we can now come into this texture, just do some checking. I think that's all good. Right, so this one that looks like a checker, content texture. I want to have a new texture, and it's saying type image or movie, and I need to open the displacement map. And you'll even notice that the roof's popped down low. You go, what's going on? That's crazy. Anyway, open, and go to my textures again, and remember I'm using a displacement map. You'll have to use this one if you're not paying for it, because that one's free just for testing purposes. So you're going to use the displacement map. I'm using metal corrugated iron sheet 003. So if I remember that, metal corrugated iron sheet, metalness, there we go, and then I go to disp. I want the displacement map. I'm going to use the one that's got the least memory. Click open image, and then we can see it's starting to get corrugations. I'll have to adjust my settings to get it the way I want it to. You'll see that looks a little bit sort of jaggedy. If I increase my subdivisions, it gets smoother. So at the moment I've got viewport set to 4. Not a lot of difference between 4 and 5, but there is a little bit. I'm going to go with 4. The higher you have it, the slower your computer's going to go. And the next thing I want to do is just adjust that height, because that is way too strong. So if I look into here and I make some adjustments in terms of my strength, that strength is 1. I'm just going to click down until I'm happy with its height. That looks about right, 0.40, that'll do. I've also in some practices had my corrugations run the wrong way. So some things that you could do to adjust that, if we come under texture, some settings I've played with, mapping, you can flip the axes, and so you'll see the corrugations running the other way. So that's one way to change it. There are various other settings I've played with and found they're quite interesting. So you can only really learn them by playing around. I think it was looking for minimum X and minimum Y. There we go, repeat. So you can muck about with some of these settings, and it will adjust some of the heights as well. But if you follow on with these steps, you should go pretty well. That's at the right height. It's cool. So now I want to put rust on my hinges. My hinges are in two parts, so the hinge attached to the door, I go into edit mode. This will need unwrapping, otherwise it won't attach properly. So if I just went A and highlighted all and then chose U and unwrapped, and then in UV editing mode, that actually unwrapped fairly well. That might actually have some of my seams on there already. So that looks to be the round section and that to be the flat sticking out section. But if I was to Control E, clear seams, and then unwrap that again, oh, that's magically done it itself. If yours doesn't unwrap well, then what you want to do, get out of rendered mode because that's bugging me, you definitely want to mark this seam down here. Highlighted that wrong. So get that section down there at the minimum, Control E and mark seam. Highlight all, U, unwrap. It hasn't really made a lot of difference, but you definitely want to mark that seam down there. Go to object mode, click this hinge. There's no seams marked on this one. I don't know how that was going to unwrap, but if I highlight it, U to unwrap, they're a little bit all over the place. And it seemed to be okay, but I'd still recommend marking your seams. And I would definitely mark this seam down here. Just hard to highlight it. And then Control E, mark seam. That would be as a minimum to allow that to unwrap flat. Looks like it's doing it itself. If you are having any weird stretching issues, then you'll have to make some more seams to do this. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is go to shading, and again textures, and create a new material slot. And I'm going to start new. And this material is going to be called rust. No, ignore what I just said. I'm going to create a new material, and it's going to be based upon the rust that I made earlier, rust tutorial. Saves me a lot of hassle. If I have a look at that hinge, I've got a bit of a problem there, so I might have to recalculate my normals. If you don't know how to find that, you can search it, function F3, and then I'm going to go normals. And I want recalculate normals. And maybe that's just a strange shadow. Where's my mouse? I think it's just possibly a shadow. Leave it there, and the one down the bottom's also got it because it's an array. It does have a strange split across there. That's probably the unwrapping. Shift A, recalculate normals, tick that inside, there we go. That'll get rid of the strange line through the middle. So that's Shift N, and then tick that box inside if you need that. I clearly did for my model. Tab out of that, click that one. This needs the same material, so we'll go plus for a new material slot, open the one that exists already, and choose Rust Tutorial, and there she goes. There's a strange little mark across there with lighting, so again Shift N if you need to, in edit mode, Shift N, take that one there, got a bit of a stretch there that I don't like. I think I'm going to leave it though, given the size of it. by the time you zoom out to here, I'm never going to see it, so I'm not bothered too much. Next thing I want to do is to put in a half moon, and I'll do that at a later recording.